Roll call.
Chisel.
Here.
Neal. Here. Olson.
Here.
Luce.
Here.
Zittergren.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the council on anything that is not on the agenda? Seeing none.
Oh, Janelle.
Is that something that's not on the agenda? Right. Okay. Can you move the microphone over to you, please?
Okay.
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Well, I was going to ask all of you and any of the others who speak that you talk loudly enough, especially for you up there and over at that table. There's a good 25 to 33% that cannot be heard, and I do not have anything wrong with my hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The Water Protection Week proclamation. Source Water Protection Week is September 25th to October 1st. In support of Source Water Protection Week, whereas the health, prosperity, and quality of life of Decorah citizens and communities depend on a reliable supply of safe, high-quality drinking water, whereas protecting our drinking water is essential to preserve our own health and economy and that of future generations, whereas we strive to build opportunities and work together to ensure a clean, safe source of water for all, whereas residents of Decorah are encouraged to recognize this precious resource and help conserve the watersheds that are in the source of our water, protect our shared water resources from pollution, practice water conservation, become involved in local water issues, and plan to protect water for future community health and economic vitality. Now, therefore, as Mayor of Decorah, I do hereby proclaim September 25th to October 1st Source Water Protection Week in Decorah, and urge all residents of Decorah to join in supporting this observance. Kristen, do you have?
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. I'm on the drinking water protection team here. Jeremy's on it as well. So is Todd with the water department's on it. And Becky Gortman's in charge of that team. She's with the Iowa Water Quality Consulting firm. And we just want to remind people that beware of anything you put on your lawn, yard, in a field, anything that gets dumped in rivers, streams, stuff like that, all ends up floating downstream and eventually getting into our water supply. So just ask everybody to be conscious of that during that week and think about that. Anything you put out there is going to eventually end up in our water. Is that something you want to be drinking or not? So thank the mayor for reading the proclamation, and hope everybody observes that week. Thanks.
Thanks for your work on that. Consent agenda.
A, minutes of the August 29th, 2022 work session and September 6th, 2022 regular meeting. B, claims. C, renewal of Class C liquor license with Sunday sales for JT Haymarket LLC. D, renewal of Class E liquor license with Class B wine permit, Class C beer permit, and Sunday sales for Decorah Mart.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Chisels, seconded by Olson. Roll call.
Chisel.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Zittergren.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Neal. Aye. Luce.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider approval of Quick Star site plan.
Okay. You hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just give a real, I think you have some of this information in the background notes, but just a real quick summary of where we started and where we are currently. So back in April, the site plan was submitted to Planning and Zoning for consideration, and the commission recommended approval, upon which a public hearing was held by the council on June 20th, after which a traffic study was commissioned and reviewed at a work session on August 29th. And then on September 12th, another work session was held. And of course, throughout that time, been a number of site plans and revisions and items discussed. And so you have a number of items in the Dropbox, which we can certainly go through. I think the one that is in front of you tonight is item C, which is the updated site plan, and I will share that one moment here. So this should look familiar as a site plan that was discussed at the work session. Quickstar today did submit a revised site plan that incorporated several of these discussed changes. They did note they didn't quite have time to make all the changes, but the second page of this document shows the most current site plan that's been submitted for your consideration. And as I mentioned, several items in the Dropbox, and we can go through them as you would like. But otherwise, unless there are other questions, we defer to council for discussion.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I would move for approval of the site plan as submitted.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Johnson. Discussion?
Would that be with the amended Exhibit C?
Yeah, as submitted.
Okay.
As submitted today by Quickstar, not incorporating all the things on the, red filled out? Randy, is that what you're saying? Or are you saying with the expectation that Quickstar,
Well, they're going to uphold what they told us last week they were going to do as my part of their submission today.
So what's in red, not necessarily what's below, right? Because I think there's not everything in red is below, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the top one is what they're submitting and we're approving.
Well, I'd speak to the fact that the Sustainability Commission's made a strong recommendation to us about flipping it so that the retail was to the front, to the sidewalks for ease of customers to get to. If the big thing was it was going to be a big retail advance for the west side, I don't see putting the pumps in the traditional situation as any effort to work with us. And I've personally found the comments about why it couldn't be done missing or not intriguing enough to even understand what they're saying. This is the way we do it. That's all we do. This is Decorah. We do some things different than others. So I'm planning to vote against the site plan.
I just want to clear up the issue with what exactly we're voting on first and make sure that I understand exactly what Quickstar is committing to. Mayor, with your permission, could I ask Quickstar's representative a few questions?
Yes, you may. Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for joining us again, Dax. I mean, it's my hope that you don't have to keep coming back every week. My initial instinct is to move to table because I hope to ensure that what we sort of came to a verbal agreement on last week is what's reflected in the actual site. And I'm worried about giving Quickstar carte blanche to simply build the way they want based on what was submitted today, even though it doesn't reflect our agreement last week. So I'm asking you as a representative of Quickstar if you intend to uphold the things that we agreed to last week.
Correct. So I don't know if we have an exact parameter of what was set. You mentioned to work with staff on some of the things, the painted, the stamped concrete, those types of things, and we weren't able in 1 week to get our civil designer to put all that put together and get it in front of you today. So my apologies on that. We tried really hard. But the things in front of you here in red that we agreed to last Monday, yes.
Including pump reductions. Was there
Correct.
shallower awning? Was that one of them, right?
Yep.
Okay. And
EV charging
and,
stations.
you know, and again, I guess I want to make sure I'm doing right by the voters of Decorah, that we're going to get what we talked about.
Yep, nope, and I honor that, and yes, we will, you know, with full submittal, if you want to make those conditions, or if you can make those conditions of, we're going to uphold what we talked about on last Monday.
Randy and Kirk, would you be okay with a friendly amendment that we just make that contingent on their upholding their, you know, what they committed to last Monday?
I would.
John looks like he wants to say something.
I'm fine with that, but I know I'm a visual person. I don't know if somebody would want to write that. If we had a blackboard, I'd say write it on a blackboard, but type it on the screen or something.
I'm trying to do it. I mean, I'm trying to write it.
I just think we want it.
Is it reflected in our minutes of last week's meeting?
Can I ask a question? And I know this is a pain. Why do we have to do this? Like, why not just table until it's in the site plan? Is there a reason not to?
Well, it costs staff time, and it's a, you know, use of public time, and it's use of Dax's time. I think that, you know, I want to trust that we have a good faith negotiating partner here, but I also want to do right by the people of Decorah.
The only reason I asked, because you said you weren't building till 2024, so that's why I'm like, well, you're not building till 2024. But if people want to move ahead tonight, I think as long as we clearly articulate out loud, and then maybe someone writes it down
Last
officially.
meeting was recorded, I believe.
But I don't know that we ever went, even last meeting, through the whole list of agreements, right?
Yeah, we did.
No,
Yeah,
I
we
think
did, one by one.
I think we did.
Is that good enough, John, to go off the minutes of last meeting or whatever, the recorded portion of that?
As long as you guys clearly remember what you voted on.
So
I just can't remember. I mean, I remember all of you voted and it was non-binding, but it just to try to move things forward. And Dax, I believe Quick Star, on behalf of Quick Star, you consented to each of those.
I presented those.
Yep, 6 items. I think there were 6 items. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're all in agreement that what was informally voted on and agreed to last week is the site plan being voted on today, then I think that should be good, as long as you're comfortable understanding what was voted on.
I think at the end of that meeting, Travis went through each of the pieces that we had discussed.
Right, but I just want to be sure that everyone agrees that that's the site plan we're approving and not what was submitted today.
So just for clarity, can I go through them?
Yeah.
You guys good with that? So the painted painted concrete at the pedestrian crosswalks with the rising up and rising down, so you have to go over, right? Pump reduction, EV charging if possible with Alliant. We realize that that's an Alliance court. The smaller facade. The sidewalk easement to create the continuity of the
Correct,
sidewalk.
and
in that
that's
corner.
showing on
Yeah,
what Jeremy had
yeah.
up, yep.
The pedestrian safety in the street, and I think that is what we directed you to work with staff on in terms
Correct.
of what is the best method there. At the very end, you said more plantings and green space in the back, behind.
There's a lot, I don't know if you've seen the landscape plan, but there's a lot of plantings and green space, and then we removed, in this site plan that's up now, we removed the parking in the back,
Okay.
which allows for
That's
quite
what
a
we had
bit
talked
more.
about. You said in the
Yep.
back you were going to do that. Yep.
Yep.
That is what I had that we agreed
I have
on last
reduction of fuel pumps and
Yep.
paying, did you say that? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
And then pay, because I was trying to do a mental checklist while listening to you.
Uh-huh.
And then, is it spelled out in this that they are paying for, was it the restriping that we were going to ask for, or the crosswalk?
We were going to ask for the crosswalk.
That's right,
And then
okay.
we directed the city to work in terms of how that best fits our road diet.
But is that spelled out here? That's what I want to know.
The problem is we haven't spelled it out, what we're going to do with our road diet. But I think that the agreement that they will pay for that pedestrian section
Was in writing previously.
was in writing previously.
And
anyway.
Dax, that's still your understanding too, is that correct?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
raised my hand for the crosswalk the
Yeah.
first meeting we were here.
All right, I'm okay moving forward with the vote, since it seems like we all know what we're voting on. I guess I had one other question or concern with the motion on the floor, that it wasn't made contingent on the engineer's recommendations. You know, Jeremy, are there any outstanding things that we should ensure we're recommending the site plan contingent on in your recommendations?
I think the only one that hasn't been addressed in this resubmitted site plan or the conditions you've listed is the easements for the levee. But there's a request for release of easements, and I think that discussion can be had when we have that. When there's a proposed, they want some easements released, we want some easements cleaned up.
Yeah,
But
and they
that
can't
was the only
touch
other
within
thing in
50
our
feet.
letter, I believe, that hasn't been addressed or is pretty minor.
All right, that clears up my 2 points of concern. Thank
And
you.
do we need to put this contingent on the DNR assessment of any pooling? Or is that something the DNR just monitors anyway?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's something the DNR will require, but again, it's part of a preliminary map, it's not even our effective
Right.
map yet.
And to be
so-
very clear for people listening, it's not in the site. The building is not in the
Correct.
flood site, so I
Correct.
don't want to confuse that.
Then with those 2 things cleared up, I'm just going to join my colleague Steve in announcing that I plan to vote no on the site plan. I'm grateful for the ways in which Quickstar has worked to make this more tolerable and appropriate for that area, but I simply still think that the site plan falls short of what our city code directs us to ensure is included in appropriate site plans. I think that the level of public comment and concern about this possible project should encourage the council to apply an extremely strict scrutiny and really ensure that we're doing our utmost to carefully apply the code. And my concerns about traffic and pedestrian suitability, as much as I appreciate the ways in which small improvements were made, are substantially not addressed. And so I do intend to vote no. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Just to make clear, are we doing it as submitted, or you have not changed whether you want to include what was just said in your motion?
I thought he did make an amendment, friendly amendment on that.
I did not make the amendment. I mean,
Okay.
Can
the items that were discussed were in this middle, right?
Mhm.
So,
I'm not, unless it's in our actual passing, I think we need to re-say what we're going to say.
well, everything we agreed upon has been recorded.
Yeah, I think I asked the question, Randy, would you accept a friendly amendment? And I think that Kirk said I would, and I feel like you also indicated that you would, Randy. Is that
What
accurate?
it takes to get this through, yeah. I'll make that amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Chisel,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Zittergroen,
No.
Neal,
Yep, aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Luce.
No?
Motion carried. Thank you. So look further to the next step of the discussion. Okay, consider approval of site plan for Aligned Energy Operations Center. I believe I'm referring this to Jeremy.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to provide a little context. I think as was discussed during the MOU discussion, Alliant has plans for a operations center near the trailhead at the Highway 952 intersection. They have submitted a site plan for just an access drive. So what was submitted doesn't have an aerial, but I wanted to just show exactly where this drive was going to be proposed on existing conditions. So Park Street here, Industrial Lane, which currently goes to the trailhead. So this will be a little bit crude, but the proposed access drive will be something like this, where it will come off of Park Street, turn to the north, and then extend over to the existing trailhead parking lot. So again, just want to make sure that was clear. There was a little confusion at planning and zoning as to where exactly this drive was being proposed. So that's much simplified, but hopefully gives you some idea of what is being proposed as part of the site plan. So it was reviewed and recommended for approval by planning and zoning. Our office did a review. We have several comments, and I think most of those are a product of the site plan being submitted before all the MOU details were worked out. So we believe that there wasn't anything that we saw that would need to hold anything up, but we would have asked for some conditions, most of which will be addressed in the MOU that I believe council discussed at the last meeting. So I can go over any, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No,
So I can go over any of the items we had noted in our letter in more detail if you'd like. But again, we felt while there are several of them, all relatively minor and or will be worked out in the details of the MOU.
And this will be a paved access road put in by Alliant and maintained by Alliant?
That is our understanding, correct, that the MOU will outline. So they'll actually do a short section of an existing industrial lane in concrete that will remain part of a city street for about 100 feet before it turns to the north, and the access drive itself will be an asphalt street, as was mentioned, to be built and maintained by Alliant Energy, with easements granted to the city for access to the trailhead as well as utilities. They are going to relocate water and sewer and add some storm sewer. So we'll have easements through the Alliant property for those utilities.
And you said that stuff was contained in the MOU itself?
Correct.
Yeah,
There will be
okay.
a draft of the MOU was discussed, I believe, at the last council meeting. We
Yep.
have a draft of
Yep.
the access easement. We're still working on the utility easement, but a lot of those details, again, that we noted in our letter should be sorted out in those documents.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jeremy.
Any other questions for Jeremy? Hearing none, do we have a motion for,
I move for approval of the site plan for the Alliant Energy Operations Center with the information that Jeremy shared with us included in that motion.
Second?
who seconded?
I did.
Olson?
Motion made by Johnson, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Johnson,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittigren.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consider a resolution setting date for a public hearing for amending Chapter 17.96 C3 Central Business Commercial District related to principal permitted uses. We get to go back to you again? Jeremy?
I think this one's me.
Very good.
So this started as a discussion, I think, with the co-op parking lot, but became a bigger question of how to treat parking garages in the C3 district. So initially, the draft of revising the permitted uses in the C3 district focused on parking garages, and the idea being parking garages separate from parking lots, so a parking garage having a structure on top of it. But then also through the process of drafting this ordinance, I believe P&Z dived a little bit further into other permitted uses in the C3 district. So I open it up for questions from the council after, if there are any, after a motion.
And we're just setting the public hearing for this.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Correct, but remember, I always say if there's going to be any changes, this is the time to actually make them in your motion to set the public hearing. If you have any changes, subject to whatever revisions you may have.
Before I make the motion, I just want to explain to the council my hoped for two changes. They're both fairly minor. If you look at the document, right now, this allows as permitted uses liquor stores, groceries, and convenience stores. Given the confusion and the weeks of argumentation and meetings that followed the unclear definition of convenience store in city code, I propose that we say liquor stores, groceries, and convenience stores, but not stores including liquid fueling stations. That is going to be one of my two suggestions, and I have these written if you all are okay with them both. The other one is when it talks about parking garages, that they must, ingress and egress access for parking garages must be located to the rear of the structure. I'm going to propose that we change that to the rear or the side of the structure, in case that is the more appropriate thing for any parking garage that were to be built.
Just for me, will you name those three again? Liquor?
Excuse me, yes. Mayor, they're already, if you look at
Give a number.
A3, I'm just adding the phrase, but not in, convenience stores, but not including liquid fueling pumps.
So is that different than 5 that says not including gas stations?
Clearly it is, given our zoning administrator's determination
Okay.
at the last time this came up.
Okay.
Convenience stores can have gas pumps is the current position of the city, so.
Okay, so then I would agree with that. Thanks, Steve.
So that, there's no motion on the table. So Mayor, that was A3, and then the other, Mayor, was down in C, where I'm adding to number 5. It says located to the rear. It will say the rear or the side.
Okay.
And I would like to make my motion with those two. John, go ahead.
So
before
I
say
just
something.
wanted to point out one other thing that was in here, and this was, I think, Councilman Zittigruen's request when I drafted this, that it does say in C8 regarding parking garages, the maximum number of parking garages located at street elevation in the district shall not exceed 3 permitted structures. I just draw that to your attention because that was kind of a special request to put in there in case anybody has any questions or wants to modify that.
Does that include, that was one of my questions. So how do we decide the scale of that, right? So if someone builds an apartment building downtown that has front retail space and then puts parking underneath their building in the back, does that count as 1? In which case, I don't love the idea of 3, given that it's actually a good use of space.
Yeah, I believe when I initially, it was, I think, just a speculative, hey, what if one possible solution was to limit the total percentage of our C3 district that was open to parking? And so, John, I'm glad you heard that speculation and turned it into code for us to consider. Thank you. My personal feeling is a parking garage will take so long to construct, but by the time there's 3 of them, if it's apparent that, a future council wants to allow for more, they can change the code.
Right, and I'm not actually, I think the distinction is an actual parking garage as opposed to underground parking under a building.
Yeah.
Right, especially if we're talking about residential spaces. Let's say the Armory, he didn't, but let's say when he remodeled that, he dug out some parking spot, mainly for the people that would live above that building. Is that technically a parking garage? So, and I mean, just thinking about that parking for our downtown retailers is an important criteria, right? They want parking, and I don't love the limit of 3 unless we could identify what those structures were. Like, I agree, 3 primarily parking only structures, yes, but if we're talking about actually people building buildings that have 90% of their function is something else, and then there's parking beneath them, I wouldn't want that to be against the 3.
This code already only allows a parking garage that is 50% of the first floor and any space below. I guess it seems to pretty clearly define parking garage, and I feel like most of the kinds of parking situations you're mentioning wouldn't qualify. It has to be fully or partially enclosed. It has to be attached to or in a structure that is, allowed in C3. It doesn't include a parking lot without a structure above it. It's not a place for storing. I guess I feel like if this limit of 3 becomes problematic for future councils, they can amend their code. And I don't know if we want to get in the weeds on defining what is and isn't a parking garage here tonight. John, do you have insight here?
this may answer part of your question, but that limitation I point out in 8, the maximum number of parking garages located at street elevation in the district shall not exceed 3 permitted structures. So the example you gave with the armory,
To be below it.
if it was below it, it would not, this cap would not apply.
Okay, thanks for that. Then I do think it's appropriate to have a cap. So I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
And it's Water Street elevation, not North Alley.
Well, I don't mind if you revise that to clarify that, because I had to think about that today. And my justification in my head why it wasn't in there was said street elevation and North Alley, Spring Lane. Is that actually an alley? Or Day Spring Lane? Is that actually, is it an alley or a street?
It's actually a street.
Then I think that should be clarified to Water Street.
Would it be sufficient to clarify it if we amended number 4 to the front of the structure at, and then in parentheses, Water Street level? Or what would you advise to make that clear, John?
Yeah, because I mean, I think we're trying to limit, we don't want access out or in Water Street.
So I
But
think,
we do want access out in Day Spring.
yeah, I think 4 and 8 then, those are the 2 places I think you would want to specify that we're talking Water Street. The front of the structure
At Water Street.
at Water Street must be used for another principal permitted use other than a parking garage. And number 8, the maximum number of parking garages located at Water Street elevation?
Yes, yes.
That second one was number 4, right?
Correct.
Right.
Access from Water Street or located?
Just if it's
Located.
at the elevation, there cannot be access from Water Street in this code.
Right.
Right.
Steve, I just have one question. What were you thinking of for the side access into a parking garage? What, did you have something in mind that you were thinking of?
Nope,
I'm
I just
trying
was thinking that if in 5 years there's a site plan review, I don't think it should be held up. I think the spirit of this law is to keep the access off of Water Street. If the access happens to be off of a side street, I don't think that should necessarily encumber a site plan with a lot more, problems. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm just trying to think of a situation that would,
River Street.
right,
An entrance off River Street would be
right.
fine.
No, that's what I was thinking of. I'm just trying to think if that'd be problematic coming off of River Street to get into a, I guess it'd be the same as what the parking.
It's the same as what it is now.
Parking ramp is now that's in there.
And if it would impede traffic flow or, it still has a site plan review to go through.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whatever
I was
street
just-
the Montessori's next to too could
Right.
also have a side.
Right, but that's Mechanic Street.
John,
yeah.
I checked that with John, and he seemed to think it was a good idea to make it clear that we would count it's an
Right,
entry off
right.
of a side
Okay.
street, so.
Yep.
One
I-
question for you, John.
Yeah.
Does this change at all as what has been going to be published at the public hearing? As to what
Yes,
has
so
been voted on before?
If these amendments are incorporated into the motion to approve,
Okay,
we'll make these changes, and that will be part of what's actually published for notice of the public hearing.
okay.
And then yeah.
And I think it's important to note that at the public hearing, I mean, the reason to have a public hearing, right, is because we might make more changes.
That's correct.
But we want to
That's
get it as
correct.
close to possible as we can there. But I do want to honor the fact that I might hear the public and be like, oh, yeah, we should do that too.
So there would be time for public comment at the public hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
But I agree, we should get it as close to possible.
Luce would move to set the public hearing for October 17th. With
Can
the
we get these?
changes made?
If you give me a second, I will say all the changes to make sure we're on the same page and email Carrie. Is that okay, Carrie? Great. So I'm suggesting changing A3 to convenience stores, but not convenience stores with liquid fueling stations. I'm suggesting changing.
Wait, can I have a question about that?
Yeah.
So are you okay if we have a convenience store with charging stations? So you're just saying liquid fuel?
I mean, that's the reason that John suggested I make that clear. Right now, I guess if Fairway wanted a couple charging stations in their parking lot, I don't personally have an issue with that. Does that sound right to you?
No, that does for me too, but if you put liquid fueling stations, then technically a gas station, a new 21st century convenience store could have charging stations in front on Water Street, and verifying that you're okay with that.
I think that would incorporate technology that doesn't exist yet, and I feel like it'd be best left to future councils to make those decisions. Right now, charging takes hours, not minutes, and I personally don't see it. I don't understand how that would be a viable business model, to have people parked in your store for hours. But if you want to, change that, that's fine with me.
No, I'm just curious, because you said liquid fueling stations. That's why not just put fueling stations?
My concern was EV chargers.
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking.
Well, but we have EV chargers in the C3 district, so.
That's why. Okay, that's why I was asking this question.
Yeah, and I didn't think you wanted to zone those out.
No.
So that I thought we wanted to. you want to eliminate fueling. You want to eliminate gas pumps, but not EV charging stations. And to me, somebody could argue, well, an EV charger is a fueling. Yeah.
The interesting question, though, as you say this, would we want, and this is a question I don't have an answer to, would we want an EV charger on Water Street? I mean, in one way we do, but do we want a car to sit there for how many hours on a parking spot on Water Street?
Well, those parking spots belong to the city. I mean, and right now you'd have trouble getting a site plan approved if you wanted to have a service station with, a bunch of charging stations where there's currently buildings. I mean, I just don't see that happening.
Okay.
Okay, we have
just one more thing about, trying to limit fueling stations. I'm not necessarily against it. It's just that, historically, there have been a number of convenience stores, gas stations in downtown Decorah that are no longer there, mostly because they were outdated and small. But one was, Don Jose was a gas station. Viking Bank was the Quick Star. There was a filling station in the parking lot across the street from the Armory. That was even before my time, but they have existed downtown, and I also would think that on some of the edges of town, say closer to Fairway and out in there may in the future be people interested in putting in a convenience store / filling station. And I'm wondering, do we really want to limit that?
I do, but.
I think that's a reasonable question. It doesn't seem to be the trend of where fueling stations are headed in terms of being appropriate for the C3 district. For all the reasons that I personally was opposed to the notion of a quick start at all in the C2 district, I think those reasons are even more correct for a C3 district given the scale of modern gas stations. And additionally, I think we all know a lot more about science than maybe they did back in the 60s when the highway ran right through town and it made sense to have service stations along the road. We now know the effects of, on school children, for instance, of their school being within 800 feet of a gas station. There's markedly higher levels of cancer cases. And so I personally think that it would be not appropriate to have a fueling station located in our most densely populated and peopled area. That's especially given that, it's a tight corridor of buildings, and if there's fumes,
Right.
where are they going to go?
But there are also models like Hy-Vees that include fuel, all the time. And, now just because Fairway doesn't have that yet, doesn't mean they may not want that in the future. I don't know. But,
okay.
I was going to say, I am very much for limiting gas stations with fueling liquid fuel. So I think that's one of the reasons putting this up.
Yeah, I mean, as far as further discussion going on in public.
But we need to get it the way we want to vote on it now rather than having to republish. And Kirk, I guess personally, again, this is a thing where if someone wants to come, if Fairway wants to come and say we want to get one gas station onto our parking lot, it'd be something I'd oppose personally. But if a future council wanted to approve it, or if people decided to elect different leaders because of my opposition or whatever, well, they can change it.
yeah, I don't think Fairway would necessarily want to put it in their parking lot, but they may want to put it on other property adjoining theirs that is not currently zoned commercial, but could be.
Hopefully they want solar chargers. EV chargers.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm not necessarily arguing in favor or against. I'm just bringing up the possibilities that, historically there have been, filling stations that were downtown, and there could be interest in doing that in the future too, perhaps.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have not had a second.
No,
Steve did make a motion, and I just want to make sure. Steve, are you okay with these four as friendly amendments? And may I read them aloud so that we're all on the same page? Thank you. Change A3 to read, but not convenience stores with liquid fueling stations. Change C4 to have water and street, water before street, and capitalize them both. C5, change it to say rear or side for entry and egress. And C8, again, insert capital water before street and capitalize street. Those are the four that we talked about, and I would personally prefer to see those in any motion. Steve, what do you think?
Yes.
Then I second.
Are those clear? Yes. Okay.
And I'm going to email them to you after the meeting, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We still need a second.
We still need a second.
Steve
Steve
seconded.
seconded.
Did Steve?
It's two Steves.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay,
Okay,
thank you.
got it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergren,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Motion carries. And that's for setting the public hearing for October 17th, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Consider an ordinance amending chapter 17.08 and 17.52 related to loading and parking space requirements. This is the third reading.
Yeah, so just a real quick review. This was a pretty large-scale change to these two chapters. We converted a lot of what was text into a table format, tried to make it easier, more organized. Referred to a lot of SUDAS design criteria, incorporated those, as well as some ADA criteria that we did not have in the code. And yeah, Planning and Zoning has reviewed the ordinance and recommends approval.
Have you received any comments from the public on this, Carrie?
No.
Okay. I would move for approval of the third reading and adopt.
Second.
Motion made to approve and adopt by Chisel, seconded by Neal. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Zittergren,
No.
Luce,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending section 8.44.030, 8.44.030, and 8.44.050 related to yard waste, second reading.
So again, this one is primarily to update code to reflect the purchase of our new leaf vacuum so that we no longer want leaves in the street unless there are certain situations where we would work with property owners to make those accommodations. But that is the primary goal of this change. Also cleaning up some other items to reflect operational, the way we operate out the yard waste site. And as I look outside and see this, I'm sorry to report some color in these trees, or perhaps that's a good thing for some of you, but yep, this is coming. So any questions, let me know. And I have not received any comments. I don't know if
I'd move for approval of the second reading.
Second.
Moved by Chisel, seconded by Neal. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergren,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
I'd move to waive the third reading and adopt.
Second.
Moved to waive the third and adopt by Chisel, seconded by Neal. Any discussion? Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergren,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Motion carried. Discussion on possible changes to snow removal ordinance. We'll go back to Jeremy.
So yeah, we'll go right from leaves into snow, sorry, again. But in talking with Travis, did want to get this one in front of you all just as a discussion topic before we bring the code, proposed code changes. So in Dropbox, you will see the proposed code changes, but just wanted to go through some of those, explain why we're proposing those, and answer any questions council might have. So, first is, and I will note too, a lot of these changes are based on feedback we've received, questions we've received in the past 2 years since we made a slight change to our alternate side parking. And so the first one is to give our department some discretion to declare a snow emergency. Currently, the only time that a snow emergency is in effect is if we get an inch of snow or more. Most of the time, that's okay. However, you can imagine a half an inch of ice or even a quarter inch of ice could be problematic. So we would like, again, some discretion to declare a snow emergency ourselves. So that's what the first section is stating. Related to that, the second question refers to notice to the public. Some of the questions we received as well, if a snow emergency is declared, when does it start and when does it end? So that is the general duration section there. So again, I think it's 4 hours after a snow emergency is declared or after there's an inch of snow that's accumulated, and then it lasts for 48 hours unless it is extended. So that is kind of the overview of that. Any questions on either of those two items before I keep moving? Okay, one of the main questions we received, so the alternate side parking, again to refresh, even day, even side, odd day, odd side. The question is always, when does the car need to be moved? So the short answer is, after 8 o'clock p.m., move your car in anticipation of the next day's required parking. So that's what this language is saying, is that between the snow emergency, or the alternate side parking, excuse me, is in effect between 12:01 a.m. and 8 p.m. So in other words, between 8 p.m. and midnight, that is the time to move the vehicles in anticipation of the next day's requirement. So that's a question, I think that's probably the most common question we received. So that allows our staff time when we start plowing that all the cars are moved where they're supposed to be moved on the appropriate day. But hopefully some adequate time for residents to move in the evening hours. Okay, and then the other part, part B here, is another question we've received is, for example, streets that have parking limitations, parking restrictions currently. So one-sided parking today without any snow emergency. What happens in a snow emergency? So another one of the attachments here is actually a list of streets we've identified where we're proposing to get new signs where alternate side parking would essentially supersede the existing parking restrictions. In other words, you could park on the side of the street that currently, under normal conditions, you can't. However, there are a handful of streets where, because of the setup of the street, either mostly because of a retaining wall or some other physical obstruction, we can't push snow to that side. We will not want the alternate side parking to supersede those restrictions. So what that means is that on the day where, if it's let's say an odd side currently does not allow parking on that side, when the alternate side parking is in effect on an odd day, there would be no parking at all on that street. Again, there's a list here that I can bring up. I believe there was 4 streets we'd propose for that. And almost always, again, because we can't physically push the snow to that side, so we need to push it to the other side where the cars would potentially be parked if they're not moved. So those are the primary code changes, and then there's some reference to a couple documents I want to go through, but any questions or comments on those changes?
What would it take to send a newsletter to those streets like we do when we have street closures?
That is something we would propose to do.
Okay,
yes. I know Kirsten has done that himself, which we greatly appreciate, but yes, there's only a handful of both. One, the streets that we would propose to have alternate side parking supersede, and those we would not, but we could communicate that to residents along.
That would be great.
All of those streets prior. That's why I wanted to do this well in advance of the white stuff falling.
So Day Street, for example, that's a tough one. It's not on the list. We had the gentleman in who had said that it was a hardship and whatnot.
So Day Street is on the list here, third one down. So basically what we're saying is that we would allow parking on either side during alternate side parking.
I'm looking at the wrong list, sorry.
Yeah, so the list, the top list here is the streets where we would essentially create put out new signs that say, no parking this side except during a snow emergency. or something along those lines. We got to figure out how the best way to communicate that. But Day Street is one of those where, because of feedback we've received, because we do have adequate space for snow storage on both sides, we would allow parking on the wrong side of the street, I guess, based on how it is under normal conditions. I misspoke. There's only 3 that we would not allow.
Yep.
Yeah, West Main Street was one of them, that from Grove Street down to the trailhead.
Yeah,
down there,
that's a tough one. There's
That's
a
a tough
retaining wall there. We have
Right.
nowhere to push the snow. We have to go to the north, which means we can't have cars there when we're moving that.
And then
snow.
our condos are all driveway.
Yeah,
right,
so it's all Kirsten's
It's
fault.
a rare spot, but,
Yep.
yep.
So there are a couple spots like that.
Some citizens, I don't know.
But I've been trying to work with the neighbors there, and giving them letters and
Yeah,
stuff
and
like
we
that. I did last
understand-
year to try to get this further along and get,
Yeah, we did make, well, alternate side parking has been in the code for a number of years. The change we did make was substantial, and so
Right.
I think it's going to be a learning
right.
procedure. We greatly appreciate Dave and his staff's assistance with helping with that education. I think last year, a lot of people learned about our alternate side parking.
Right.
So
Thanks.
you will,
Thanks, Jeremy, for your good work on that.
Yeah, and I want to mention one more thing. It is the snow removal agreement. So as you know, businesses are allowed to push snow out into the street for a fee. And so we currently have a very simple agreement, kind of a, yes, we want to push out, here's your square footage, here's your cost. And we would like to clarify some of the details. We have, again, this is a product of some things some issues, I guess I'll say, we've been experiencing. So basically, we've revised this agreement, and so this is just a sample. Pretty straightforward on the first page is contact information, and then we would calculate the area of the parking lot being pushed out. But I think the key thing we would like to clarify is that snow should only be pushed out into the street when we are hauling or blowing downtown. Otherwise, we end up with random piles in the middle of the street that, after our staff have spent hours plowing, have to go back out with different equipment and pick up. And so we would like to set up, using hopefully our mass communication or something along those lines, where we will communicate with these businesses that have elected to push out, again, for a fee. We will tell them when we are hauling, so that that's when they can push out. Otherwise, we would like to work with them to push it off to the side, and then as that accumulates, eventually we may come and either haul ourselves with city staff, maybe it's the next day. But again, trying to work through an issue that's come up a number of times, again, with these miscellaneous piles in the middle of the street. So that, I think, is the biggest. There's lots of language here. We'd specify which street they can push out on, just because we have certain streets that are easier for us to collect than others. That, I think, is the biggest piece. So that's why I wanted to communicate that with you all, as well as these other changes, and just receive any feedback or potential modifications to this or issues you might see.
so you'll be bringing forth ordinance information.
Correct. Yep. And this document's is referenced in the ordinance, as is a designated streets list, which is essentially a list of streets that are allowed to push their sidewalk snow into the street, mostly downtown businesses that really have nowhere else to go with it. We want to identify where that is and is not allowed.
And that's not really in this, but just as you're addressing snow, I know last year you had talked about having new door hangers done that you could work with code enforcement and PD on before next season,
Yep,
which is
we have a
rapidly
draft
approaching.
to the publishers right now that's working on, we want to do kind of a tear out. Yes, so the short answer is yes, we're working on those. We're working with a vendor right now to get those
Okay, great.
produced. Yep.
Okay, very good. Hopefully we stick to the leaves for a while.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay. Consider adjustment to pay rate of Sergeant Dustin Van Gundy. Carrie, can you give some background on that, please?
Actually, David's going to be doing
Okay,
this one.
that sounds good.
Yeah, I want to discuss a pay issue that we had arise in the police department within this last year. With the union pay increases that went into effect on July 1st, we had a sergeant fall behind in pay. Sergeant's now making less than an officer that he started with at the police department. They both started at the same time. One got promoted, one did not. The one that got promoted is making less money than the patrol officer. Sergeant's a first-line supervisor, one of the most important roles we have at the police department. Position involves getting the job done through others, maintaining standards of the department, maintaining and creating cooperation with employees, and the first-line sergeants are supervisors which must act on behalf of the police department and its leaders. We expect sergeants to train, develop human resources, coordinate personnel issues, help place personnel in areas appropriate to their capabilities and interests, and stay aware of internal conflicts. Sergeants are also critical in the evaluation of personnel. Besides what I just mentioned with the police department, we also have sergeants that are evidence officers. Both of our sergeants are evidence officers, so they take on that extra duty and responsibility. They're both FTO field training officers. And at the Decorah Police Department, sergeants are your night supervisors. That's all there is. There's no captain, there's no chief. If the patrol officer has a question at a situation, they don't really call up the city attorney at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, do we have enough for a domestic? They don't call up the county attorney at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, is this enough for a search warrant? So we rely heavily on our patrol sergeants. You all have a salary survey that was added to the Dropbox. If you noted in there, some agencies use the title lieutenant instead of sergeant. I just want to note that in my salary survey, I didn't list a lieutenant in that salary survey unless he was a first-line supervisor. Some agencies have sergeants and lieutenants. I didn't put a lieutenant in that salary survey to try to inflate it. If a lieutenant's listed in there, they have the same job as a sergeant. They're just called something different. It's kind of semantics. Also in the Dropbox is a letter that I wrote to the council and city manager, a recommendation to fix the pay issue. As you can tell, it's not overinflated. It's $1 more an hour than the top patrol officer, $1.66 more an hour than the officer that Sergeant Van Gundy started working here with. It's also $1.22 less an hour than the current sergeant's making, so I'm not putting those two as equals. One's got more seniority, they should make more. I don't know if the questions come up or if you've thought, why are we talking about this now? Pay increase happened in July. The police department tried to address this issue as soon as we saw it coming. We talked to the city manager and said, here's an issue we're going to have. The city manager asked us to wait till we got the League of Cities salary survey. Wanted to see what the comparisons were. So we have been patiently waiting for that salary survey, and now we're just told it's not coming. So that's why I haven't been before you trying to address this as soon as it's come up. And it's something we need to rectify. It affects our morale. And we want to do him right.
So we can take a motion on this?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we increase the pay of Sergeant Van Gundy.
Luce would second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Luce.
I have a, thank you.
Discussion?
I have a couple questions. To start with, I'm very inclined to, agree with you. I agree with your argument. I don't think it's okay that sergeants are making less than the people that they're supervising, especially when they're equally tenured. I totally agree about the disparity, and it's a disparity that exists in other places in our city organization. And maybe this is the right way to go about addressing it, just fire by fire. But I want to make sure that we're going about this properly. And so I have two different kinds of questions. The first kind of question is just that, for clarification, how did this end up on the agenda? I'd like to understand, just was this put on there by the administration or the staff, or what's the?
It was put on by Dave coming up and speaking with myself and Travis, and we felt we will be discussing salaries, hopefully in October at that work session,
Right.
but we felt that this should probably be dealt with
Because I don't want,
sooner.
so Travis is okay with this whole approach?
Correct.
That's part, I just wanted to ensure that we were not just doing a one-off without a plan to address the other instances where these kinds of disparities exist in the city governments. I guess that's the answer to my question. I just want to make sure that this isn't an end run around whatever, an attempt to fix one problem and not fix the whole city government's issue with this. So thank you very much for bringing this up, Chief.
When I talked to Travis about it in July, because I asked him about the salary scale, he mentioned that this particular position was the most sort of grossly egregious one that we really needed to address. So I think he knew this was coming for sure.
If this gets approved, when will this go into effect? Is like an immediate thing, or?
That is actually that can be up to you. If you want it immediate, you can add that to the motion.
Okay.
Could someone remind me, the raise is $1 something an hour?
66 or something like that.
And we did the salary adjustments in July, correct?
For union.
For union.
Mhm.
I would actually propose that we made it retroactive to July. Should have fixed it then.
Do we have an easy mechanism of doing that, Carrie?
Renee can do an adjustment on the paycheck, yes.
To make it retroactive to July?
Yeah,
Thank
so I would actually make it retroactive to July when we should have probably fixed it at that point. And again, I think it's well understood that this is a particularly unfair pay scale at the moment.
Seconder accepts that change.
Okay?
Are we setting a precedent of doing that for everyone whose salary we adjust when and if we make decisions about this?
Well, again, I think that from when I talked to Travis, this was essential, and I still think it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, so given it's the right thing to do in my mind, and that this is the one that I think Travis was the most concerned about, it makes sense to me that we do this.
And oftentimes, if it comes on a case-by-case basis, if it's happening. Any further discussion?
I just want to thank Chief Smutzler and the rest of the staff for noticing this problem that we've got here. I know retention has been a problem we've had in the past with some police officers, and if this helps alleviate some of that problem, this is a good thing. So thanks, guys.
And I appreciate the legwork of the comps. It was not out of lack of understanding or out of compassion for the officer and his situation. I did really want to know what the data was from other communities, and you provided more than a solid.
Personally contacted
Yeah.
them.
So thank you for that.
Okay, roll call?
Neal?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Chisel?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Zittiger?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Carrie, do you have anything?
Just continuing, we do have group casts ready to go in the office, and so we are now going to be contacting larger organizations. So if you have any organizations of an email that we could send that to, please forward it on to me. I know Emily has an idea for me with co-op. We received the equipment for the credit card, so I'm hoping that we'll be taking that shortly. It seems like it should be an easy setup. And then we also have the update this week with Civic.
Do we have a large press release that could go out about Comcast and how to sign up?
We would need to create one, and we can.
Okay.
It's just getting that creative groove going on, so.
Would that, I don't know if the paper and Decorah News would want to sort of do a splashy splash that the city now has capabilities. That might be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
We can connect.
Once the charge card gets into place.
Well, no, this is for the group comm is what I'm talking about, where you can sign up for notifications from all things city.
Particularly, people will want to know about snow emergencies and stuff.
Yeah.
This is not spamming you about city activities. This is informing you about crucial situations facing the city. You can sign up for spam, though, if
And
you
you
want to.
can check what you're interested in too, right?
Correct. We want to be very careful that we don't overuse it, because I'm hearing with the schools, some parents are kind of checking out because they use the same one because there's constantly something coming through. So we do want to be careful. It's going to be more for the emergencies for streets and water department.
Okay, departments, anybody have an update? Yeah, you have
I
to,
just
you have
wanted
to
to-
remember to give the other ones a chance to.
I tried to give it to, I was gonna ask Dave if you wanted me to do his for him. I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't see Carrie's email on our update, Prairie Novak Electric started installing our solar panels on the street department building today.
Yay! I have a question. I have a question for you, Jeremy, but it might be for Greg, but he left, so I'm going to ask you. Now that Washington Street is underway, there is that segment of sidewalk that I do believe that person has received a letter. Well, they received them with Chad, I know that.
Yeah, I think they received one before I started, which would have been.
Yes, so they have had multiple letters. Are we going to work on enforcing that sidewalk and putting that sidewalk in?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I mean, I know that there are folks who struggle on that sidewalk.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Randy?
Just quick update from the chamber. Had our meeting last week. We are going to be one of the off-site work study places for Luther College.
Yay!
That's
I
great.
don't know what they call it, level 1 or something like that,
Yeah.
that we're going to be approved for. And they were gearing up for the Viking cruise thing today.
I
So
heard
saw
that
a
on
lot
the
of
news.
folks in town as I was driving through, so hopefully that went well and we can get more of them back next year.
Good.
That's it. Thank you.
Emily?
Nothing, Mayor.
Kirsten? Likewise, nothing. Steve Luce?
Yes, I don't know if you've realized it, but Ken Burns' newest documentary,
Yes.
U.S. and the Holocaust, started last night. It's being rebroadcast tonight at 7. And then right after that, again at 9:15. And then at next 2 nights, the other 2. So it's 6 hours, 2 hours apiece, 3 different nights. And it's incredible from what I've read about it.
I did watch it. It was incredible. Anything
We
else?
had SMID meeting, talked about finishing things up and trying to see if maybe another way to support the waters will be a golf cart as opposed to a agreement sharing a truck with the city and the waters. So that's being considered. And there'll be another one next month.
Good.
Thank you.
Steve Zittergron?
I have 3 very brief things. The first is I wanted to congratulate John on his 52-plus mile run. Quite a feat. Congratulations on the culmination of all your hard work. I also wanted to invite my fellow council members to do something that I did that I thought was really useful, and I would send them an email, but that sort of stuff is illegal. I was reached out to by Hacker Nelson, who asked me to just come and hear from them regarding what they thought would be reasons for considering continuing to keep our business with them. And I encourage you to reach out to them if you're interested in hearing from them as well. Following that conversation, I had conversations with Carrie and with Travis as well about the audit, about how the city staff interfaces with Hacker Nelson. And I thought that conversation was really helpful for me too in sort of realizing that maybe it's not a cut and dry, apples to apples comparison when we're going to be looking at these comps. So I encourage you to find out what we're getting. I think the other thing, and Travis will probably talk about this, or Carrie will at some future council meeting, but it seems as if it might very well be in the city's best interest to continue using an accrual-based accounting system, which means that that some of the bids that we're going to get, the baseline bid for cash basis, probably won't be appropriate for us to consider. This is, I guess, based on conversations that your office had with bond counsel and our financial advisor, that was sort of new information coming to light. So I just encourage the council to arm themselves with information about this. And there's a couple good ways to do it. Talk to Carrie if you have questions, or talk to me. The other thing is just that I think, I think I would like to, as a council, have a conversation at some point about ways in which this whole extended, protracted conversation about Quick Star, from the Board of Adjustments appeal to the site plan to the hours-long public hearings, I think that could have all gone much better with earlier and better conversations, with different approaches to things from staff, maybe from us too. And I don't think that, this is, as far as I know, not just the first or the second or even the third instance of, long, protracted, divisive arguments over new business development. And for the most part, when new businesses want to come to town, we're excited. We roll out the red carpet, we issue incentives, we pass their site plan with no questions. Some businesses are different. Some site plans are different, and some proposed developments are different for their scale, for their, whatever, the acrimony they generate, whatever. I feel like our process needs to be better than it was. And I think that a lot of what led to this terribly long, expensive process, we don't have to do this the next time. So I'd like to have that conversation sometime. I don't know how or when, but I just basically am warning you that I'm not done with this. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Ross?
Bolton and Mink had their listening session with the downtown retailers. It was well attended. I believe there were between 45 and 50 in attendance. I did walk Water Street and speak to several different people who attended to get feedback, and they said that they felt heard and that it was a good civil conversation, and that they were able to have questions answered and felt like they were able to provide input. So I thought that was good feedback. And I'm glad we got some stuff done tonight. I think even though the process was arduous, it was not simply the site plan. Some of the changes that are probably forthcoming that are being triggered by Quickstar needed to happen anyway. The engineering firm showed that, and I think the redevelopment of College Drive and making it more like the C3 with safe crossings, with some continued work like the street department has done in the greening of College Drive, so it is not a concrete jungle, is beneficial, and I look forward to Quickstar as a partner in that.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing, Mayor?
Two things. One, I'm happy to hear about the potential work session for the salary thing. Since every year about this time, I think I've said it going forward, so I'm anxious, happy to be looking at that piece. I did attend the Bolton Mink, and I just wanted to report back that I thought Rose, who was the representative, did an excellent job of encouraging conversation, encouraging questions, and answering questions, and I was happy with the enthusiasm. That being said,
I forgot one thing. I said I spoke too soon in the effort to be like, I don't have anything.
Then I know what you're going to say.
Well, we have a Sustainability Commission on Wednesday.
Okay, well, no, it was something else.
Okay. What do you think I was going to say? I'm like, what was
Something
it?
to do with scooters.
With schools?
Scooters.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to say that at all. Then I was also going to just comment that I'm glad you walked Water Street. Kirsten and I have been walking Water Street. Again, I think it's great to talk to businesses. We have not been able to finish our walk on Water Street, so if there are businesses out there who are like, Kirsten and Emily didn't come talk to me, we still will. It just seems to rain every Saturday. And then the other thing, I want to just respond to what Steve said. I wholeheartedly agree. I think the Quickstar vote was probably the hardest vote I've taken, honestly, in my entire time on council, because you weigh in your mind this idea, and I wanted to say this when Quickstar was here, but I didn't have it in me. You weigh what your constituents want, right, with the fact that your constituents want different things, and you weigh this idea of how we used to be in terms of where are we headed. And I think that the crux of being on council is that we don't have enough time, and we have to figure out how to figure out vision and comprehensive plan. And I like what we're doing with the C3 district and zoning. That our zoning code is getting old, and we got to figure out how to put our code in a place that we can make these decisions like we're supposed to, as opposed to trying to make the decisions that we know people want, but we can't quite do it because our code isn't quite there. And that's how I feel like the Quickstar decision went for me. And that's a really hard place to be. It's really uncomfortable when you don't have law and code to say like, yeah, but I know where we should be, where we want to be, where the future is, and our code hasn't moved fast enough for us to get there. So I just wanted to echo Steve's sentiment about that frustration.
Just a comment about League of Cities coming up for this week.
Yes. Iowa League of Cities is coming up next week, Wednesday through Friday. be sure and confirm with Carrie.
Are we having a work session?
The work session is until, not in September.
So we're not having a work session in September, is what I'm
No.
asking. Okay.
No, it's October. We're talking, the work session we're talking about is in.
We're talking, budget and finance is before the next meeting, October 3rd, regarding the senior hospitality center.
Right, but when are we talking about the salary schedule?
That is at the end of October.
So I would suggest, because we aren't going to have a salary comparison, that if council has ways and metrics that they want to see, that we actually get that ahead of that work session so that we could make some progress at that work session, as opposed to, oh yeah, we want to see this, right? I mean, our city staff deserves some progress. We aren't going to get the data that we want, so we need to figure out what's the essential data we need so that when we come to that work session, it's here for us to look at.
And Travis has reached out to the department heads to find out that information with the lake towns. And then also we have also submitted information to 2 other studies. I just don't know if we'll have them by October.
Okay. Does Minnesota or Wisconsin have that data?
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.